Steve Wilson from Grand Junction, Colorado. As a graduating young senior in high school, an athlete, pretty fair student, I found myself in a very interesting position, raised evangelically, fundamentally, with a serious background in the Hebrew belief system, of that of being obedient and obeying, which is really, really an interesting concept. As I got out of high school and entered college, there's this thing called the rite of passage, and I found myself being tested, my fundamental belief system. And this area of college was very interesting, and I chose to take my value system and put it at the doorway. And I chose to go down this road of enjoyment and things of that nature. Well, after a year of not doing well in college, I joined the Marine Corps, and that's when everything began in my life, because I began seriously to give up the values that I had. And you know, it's very difficult to have these values and then compromise them knowing what you know. But you see that road that looked so glossy and so beautiful, and all of the shiny elements, the beautiful cars and the jobs and the trips and the wonderful, beautiful women. They were there and I was there, so I took it. And it was kind of an easy story about running to the absurd to avoid the obvious. See, I had what was known as a good life, correctly eating, understanding, and with a desire to become a doctor, if you will. Also, my father wanted a professional baseball player, and I was fortunate enough to play well enough to have some of the pro teams talking to me. Well, with all of that said, I continued down that road with my brother when I got out of the Marine Corps, selling insurance. And that's when a person really is tested, because you see, everybody is going to a different place for restaurants, for eating, and for all of the things that go with marketing, and I was there. And what first of all looked pretty glitzy, now I'm seeing these things in the full swing. Men that had been there before in this uncompromising position. And I am going to draw your attention to the little thing called Death Valley. And it's a description that we all have seen, and it's really quite ugly. Well, the entry into that was most interesting because it was played out to me in a very pretty way. Once I got in there, I saw the drinking and the pornography and the gambling and the drugs and all those things that go with people who are not satisfied with what they're doing. And there I found myself leaving my value system at the door to try to be a positive impact, trying to make a living in that world, knowing that there was something missing. And in the process of doing that, I found myself in a pretty ugly position, because it's kind of an unusual statement, but because we do nothing, we are robbed of the ability to feel. And that struck home with me, because you see, that year in 1963, when the whole thing began, there I am getting out of the Marine Corps, a really incredibly healthy and a good athlete, played some ball in the Marines, and playing golf. My sport went to golf, played that reasonably well. And then in the business world of putting insurance, investments, and I had a home improvement business, and I got into the world of nutrition simply because I had some needs there. And it looked to me like a very interesting world. Well, in that world, the craziest thing took place. While I was marketing all of these things and beginning to ask questions about diet, which was never brought up, they used stimulants instead of really food, talking about the proper way to make energy, which I started to question these things. But I was winning awards and earning a substantial amount of money. And in the process, I created an ugly man. I created a 50-year-old man biologically, but I made him look like he was 70 to 75. And that's kind of an ugly story because now I've got children, 4 of them to be exact, and they're starting to have children, and I was not fit. High blood pressure, working on diabetes, a little bit overweight, gout, arthritis, you just kind of name it. I was running it down that road. So in that passageway over there, the problems that I saw were not the problems. They were the solutions to problems that people had. And so somewhere in there, I returned to the way I was brought up in terms of being obedient, where there is freedom. And I began to study the properties of man, how we are designed. And in doing so, there is a form of restitution that came into play to return to you that which you've lost. Well, I had lost my health and I'd lost my passion, and it was all about earning a living, and that is wrong. So somewhere in that area, I went back to school, wrote my doctorate as a naturopathic doctor, and what a difference. I began to see things that I knew to be true, that nutrition, proper eating habits had everything to do with it. And that tipping point happened in 2002. And in 2002, I really turned on, and I began to return to scriptural studies about how I was to eat. And I found that there were incredible truths in there and incredible freedoms. And through obedience to how the physiology of the body worked, I began to build a product that would meet those needs rather than buying the things that we were marketing. And in a short 10, 12 years, now mind you, I moved slowly because I was walking on an unusual road. But it came to be that in just a few years, I had restored that old guy. My gout was gone, my blood pressure was down, and I forgot to tell you about the periodontal issues that I had. And I found an interesting thing, that what you eat, and all diseases begin in the mouth. And here I had incredible periodontal issues with deep scaling, and it was just an ugly picture. So when this doctor that did the work for me, he said, here's what you need to do to keep from coming back. And believe me, I did it. Well, in 2015, when my life changed, and I turned to be right at 73, 74, my son Nate said, Dad, I want to take you climbing for your 75th birthday. Well, in that time frame, I had given up the game of my life, which was golf, because it was getting in my way to become what I wanted to be, which was a kind of a point on the end of that spear to prove that a good, healthy body could be restored if I were obedient. And that truth came because I started to understand the principles of what makes ATP, what makes cleaning of the body, and more than that, what makes cleaning of the brain. And packaging this whole thing, it came down to clean brain, how to get it clean. Well, now we know a whole lot about sleep, and we've built a product to along with that. To clean the body, we built a product along those lines to create ATP, to clean the liver, clean the blood. It's a very interesting thing. But more importantly, there's a discipline in terms of eating correctly. And that moved in, and the next thing I know, what I could never have done in the past, at the ripe old age of 75, I'm climbing rocks, vertical stuff. And here I am with a fear of heights and snakes. So it's kind of an interesting story. And one of the things that I can pass on to you is that as I accomplished this, and now I'm out talking to people about their blood pressure, about a lifestyle that they can live with. That the things that I hear from clients lay this story out, and they say, if I'd only know. Now I'm working with people with Alzheimer's disease or pre-dementia, and the results are just absolutely phenomenal. losing weight, gaining cognitive skills back. And there's one narcotic that, according to Winston Churchill, is the narcotic of all narcotics, and that's victory. And what I can tell you now is when I moved from that world into this incredible world of the story of the Death Valley, and it rained there, and it happens once every 100 to 500 years. In the following year, in 2005, that valley blossomed into the most incredibly beautiful valley of flowers, and it was so verdant. Well, I looked at that and I said, this is really life. Everything is potential to you and to I if we simply nourish it. You too can have the same thing that I have enjoyed. It's just a matter of understanding, a little bit of discipline, and a little bit of accountability. Find somebody to work with, and this is my story.